The night sky above Earth had always been full of mystery. For centuries, people had looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was out there, if life beyond their own small world was possible. Humanity dreamed, wrote stories, built telescopes, and finally launched ships that touched the Black Sea above. But even with all of that, no one truly expected what happened on that quiet night when the signal came. It was faint, broken, almost like static whispering across an old radio. At first, the scientists at the listening station thought it was interference, some glitch from a far-off satellite or leftover noise from cosmic radiation. But then the sound repeated. Again, and again. And soon, patterns began to emerge. Dr. Elias Morgan was the first to notice it. He had spent years of his life listening to empty signals, chasing nothing but silence and mathematical noise. Most nights he worked alone, tired but stubborn, staring at screens that offered nothing new. But that night his heart skipped a beat. The hairs on the back of his neck rose as he leaned forward. This isn't random," he whispered. It wasn't random at all. Within hours, more scientists were called in. Computers broke down the strange signal, decoding the repeating structures. And slowly, painfully, meaning began to appear. Words, sentences, a message. Not human. The first time the team realized this truth, the room went silent. No one wanted to breathe. No one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. But Elias did. His voice trembled. This isn't from Earth. The world changed that night. The message was fragmented and damaged, but the core was clear. The Koruth are coming. Worlds will burn. We are not enough. We are falling. To all who hear, stand, or we are lost. It was not a greeting, not a peaceful introduction. It was a desperate cry for help. The scientists knew immediately what this meant. Someone out there, alien, real, and alive, was fighting for survival, and they hadn't meant for humans to hear it. The message had been aimed at someone else, some ally hidden deep in the stars. Earth was never supposed to be part of this conversation. Humanity wasn't ready. At least that was what everyone believed. But humanity had heard. And once something is heard, it cannot be ignored. For days, debates raged in secret halls of governments and research centers. Should they answer? Should they reveal themselves? Some leaders argued no. Humanity was small, fragile, and barely capable of traveling beyond its own moon. They had no fleets, no mighty weapons, no colonies across the galaxy. What can we do? One voice said. We'll only paint a target on ourselves. Others argued that this was a chance like no other. Proof of life beyond Earth had fallen directly into their hands. Not only proof, communication, a plea. And through all the voices, through all the fear, a quiet truth echoed in the hearts of many. They were asking for help. And humans had always been a species that answered cries for help. News could not be hidden for long. Leaks spread. Soon the world knew. For the first time, every nation, every person, realized the stars were not empty. We were not alone. Across coffee shops, living rooms, and crowded city streets, the same words were whispered. Someone out there needs us, and something stirred in humanity. Something old, something fierce, a fire that had carried them through wars, disasters, and impossible challenges. They could not turn away. Not everyone agreed, of course. Fear was natural. There were protests, panic, and endless arguments. But underneath it all was a steady current, a shared pulse beating in unison. If someone is calling for help, humanity will answer. Meanwhile, far beyond Earth, the Veyron Collective, those who had sent the message, had no idea it had been heard by such a young, small world. They had not meant for humans to hear it. In their ancient records, Earth was nothing. A blue planet, primitive and reckless, unready for the vast weight of the galaxy. But fate did not care for readiness. Humanity had listened, humanity had understood, and humanity would not stay silent. That night, Dr. Elias Morgan sat alone in his office, staring at the decoded words on his screen. His colleagues had gone home exhausted, but he couldn't leave. He kept reading the same broken line again and again. The Koruth are coming. We are not enough. He thought about the stars above, about how small Earth was, about how fragile humanity truly seemed in the face of such a vast universe. And yet, he also thought of what he knew best about his people. Humans never back down. Not from storms, not from wars, not from impossible odds. Slowly, he leaned forward, typed a few words into the console, and with a shaking finger, pressed the transmit key. It was a simple reply. Nothing grand, nothing complicated. This is Earth. We heard you. It was the beginning. The words shot into the dark sea of stars racing toward the unknown. Elias didn't know who would hear them, or what they would think. He only knew one thing. Humanity had taken its first step into the wider galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again. The reply from Earth had been sent. It was short, almost too short for the weight it carried. This is Earth. We heard you. For hours after, silence hung over the listening stations. Dr. Elias Morgan sat with his team, their eyes locked on the receivers, waiting for a response that might never come. Some doubted anyone would answer. Others feared what kind of answer they might receive. Then, on the third night, the signal returned. It was stronger this time, clearer, as though whoever had sent it had turned their gaze toward Earth. And, in that moment, humanity realized they were no longer hidden in the quiet corner of the galaxy. The message was heavy with sorrow and urgency. Through translation, through patterns and codes, the meaning unfolded. The Koruth advance. We are breaking. Our fleets are gone. Our worlds burn. Allies silent. If you can hear this, know that we did not mean for you to. The Veyron Collective had finally spoken directly. The words struck deep. Humanity wasn't supposed to be part of this. The message hadn't been intended for them. They were too young, too small, too fragile. The Veyron said as much. Do not answer. Stay hidden. Survive. But the reply had already been sent. Earth had already been noticed. When the recordings reached the world's leaders, chaos followed. Emergency meetings were held across every major nation. Some voices trembled with fear. We cannot involve ourselves in this war. Look at us. We barely have colonies on Mars. We have no fleets, no weapons of their scale. If we step into this, we will be destroyed. Others argued differently. If we remain silent, we are cowards. We have always been the ones to step forward when someone cried for help. We cannot turn away now. The debate was endless, burning through days and nights. In hidden chambers, plans were whispered. Some suggested preparing defenses for the inevitable day the war spilled into Earth's skies. Others spoke of reaching out again, of proving to the Veyron that humanity would not hide. But no decision from politicians mattered as much as the reaction of the people themselves. News of the signal spread. It could not be contained. In schools, children asked their teachers if Earth would help the strangers. In crowded cities, people watched screens replaying the alien words. Across online forums, debates turned into waves of emotion. Fear. Yes. But also something stronger. Curiosity. Compassion. Determination. Humanity had always wanted proof that they were not alone. And now that proof had arrived. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as voices crying out for help. Ordinary people began writing messages to the stars, even knowing they might never be heard. You are not alone. Earth stands with you. Hold on, we're coming. The world was no longer divided into borders and flags. For the first time, humanity felt like a single people, united by something far greater than themselves. But in the halls of power, the fear was still strong. Many leaders argued for silence, believing the Veyron's warning. One late evening in a dim council chamber, Dr. Elias Morgan was invited to speak. He stood before presidents, generals, and prime ministers, the man who had first heard the signal. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. I know what you are afraid of, he said. You fear extinction. You fear that if we step forward, we will be crushed. But hear me when I say this. If we turn away, we will lose something far worse than our lives. We will lose who we are. We will become the kind of people who ignore a call for help. The room was silent. Every leader stared at him, some with anger, some with doubt, but many with something else. Recognition. Because in their hearts, they knew he was right. A week later, a second message was prepared, not just from a scientist, not from one nation, but from Earth itself. A voice chosen not for power, but for humanity's spirit. A young woman, an astronaut who had once lived for 6 months aboard the International Space Station, looking down at the blue world she called home. Her words were broadcast into the stars. "This is Earth. We heard your call. You are not alone. We will not let you fall." On the other side of the galaxy, the Varen Collective listened in shock. They had begged for help from allies older and stronger than themselves. They had expected silence. Instead, a primitive, fragile world had answered. They debated furiously. Some dismissed humanity as children. Others feared their recklessness would bring only ruin. But there were a few who saw something else. The humans had spoken not with calculation, not with fear, but with heart. And in those words, the Varen felt something they had not felt in centuries. Hope. Back on Earth, preparations began. The governments argued still, but the people had already chosen their path. Volunteers lined up. Engineers studied the alien signals, hungry to learn. Soldiers polished old ships and weapons even as scientists dreamed of new ones. Humanity had no fleets, no mighty empires, no ancient wisdom of the stars. But they had something the galaxy had long forgotten. They had the will to fight for others, and so a small planet, uninvited and unready, began to take its first steps into a war it did not start, yet one it could not ignore. The message had been sent. Earth's voice now floated among the stars, carried on fragile radio waves waiting for someone to answer. For weeks, the world held its breath. Satellites listened, observatories scanned, and every night humanity wondered, will they reply? Will they come? And then one evening, the sky above Earth changed forever. It began with a flash over the Pacific Ocean. Radar stations lit up, warning of something vast entering the atmosphere. Military forces scrambled, terrified it might be hostile. But as the object slowed, stabilized, and hovered quietly above the clouds, humanity realized it was not an attack. It was a ship. The first alien ship to ever come to Earth. It was enormous, larger than any human craft, its surface glowing with patterns that seemed to shift like water. It hummed with quiet power, but there were no weapons fired, no threats made. It simply waited. People across the world looked up at the sky that night. Phones shook with recordings, news channels went wild, and children pointed upward in awe. Humanity's dream, the question that had haunted them for centuries, was answered. They were not alone. The governments of Earth, after frantic debate, chose a small island base in the Pacific as the site of first contact. Military guards surrounded it, but scientists and diplomats were also flown in. Dr. Elias Morgan, the man who had first heard the signal, was among them. When the alien craft finally descended, it was silent except for the soft hum of its engines. A ramp extended, and for the first time, humanity saw the Varen. They were tall, slender beings with pale, shimmering skin that seemed almost translucent under the sun. Their eyes were large, reflective, like pools of silver. They moved with a grace that made humans feel clumsy and heavy by comparison. The air was thick with tension. Soldiers kept their hands near their weapons. Scientists whispered furiously, recording everything. But then one of the Varen stepped forward. Its voice echoed strangely as though two tones spoke at once. Yet the words were clear, translated by devices that hummed softly on their chests. "We did not wish you to hear our call," it said. "You are young, fragile. This war is not yours." No one spoke for a moment. The humans stared at the alien, unsure if this was a warning or an insult. Finally, Elias stepped forward. His voice trembled, but his words carried weight. Maybe it is not ours. But you asked for help, and we heard you. That makes it our fight too. The Varen tilted their head, studying him. Their silver eyes reflected the human delegation as if searching for something hidden inside them. You do not understand, the alien said softly. The Koruth have ended civilizations greater than yours. Worlds burn in their path. We barely stand. You cannot hope to survive against them. Elias smiled faintly, though fear burned in his chest. Maybe not, but we have never been the kind of people to hide when someone is crying for help. That is not who humans are. The Varian delegation retreated to their ship, leaving the humans restless and uncertain. Days passed as they deliberated, speaking in voices Earth could not hear. Some feared the aliens would leave and never return. But on the fifth day, the Varian spoke again. We cannot ask this of you, they said, yet you insist. So listen well. If you join us, your world will be marked. The Koruth will know of you. They will come for you. You will no longer be safe. The human council sat in silence. The threat was clear. But then the young astronaut who had spoken Earth's message stepped forward once again. Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet strength. Earth has never been safe, she said. We've faced wars, storms, disasters, and death since the day we first stood on two legs. But every time we got back up. Every time we endured. If the Koruth come for us, let them come. We will stand anyway. Her words carried across the room, across cameras, across the hearts of those watching, and for the first time the Varen seemed shaken, not by fear, but by something else. Respect. That night, the Varen leader met privately with Elias. They spoke for hours about the war, about the Koruth, about the countless worlds already lost. At last, the Varian said, You do not have fleets. You do not have weapons like ours. Yet you speak as though you believe you can change the course of this war. Tell me, human, why? Elias looked up at the stars. He thought of Earth, the children watching the sky, the volunteers signing up to fight, the hope burning in every person who whispered, You are not alone. And then he said quietly, Because we've never known when to quit. That is our strength. The Varen was silent for a long time. Then slowly, he bowed his head. Perhaps, he whispered, that is what the galaxy needs. The first alliance between Earth and the stars was sealed that night, not with contracts or signatures, but with shared understanding. Humanity was no longer an outsider, no longer a hidden world. They had stepped into the galaxy, and the galaxy could never look at them the same way again. The Varen left Earth with promises of cooperation, leaving behind knowledge, technology, and a message. The Koruth were coming fast, and as their ship disappeared into the night sky, every human watching felt the same weight in their hearts. The war was no longer far away. It was coming for them, and humanity was ready. The Varen ship left Earth, carrying messages of warning and promise. For many, that night was unforgettable. Children pointed at the stars, dreaming of what lay beyond. Soldiers polished old rifles with pride. Engineers sketched late into the night, their imaginations burning brighter than ever before. The world was no longer the same. Humanity was no longer just an isolated species. They had been seen, they had been noticed, and now they had chosen their path. The war of the galaxy would become their war. At first, the task seemed impossible. Earth had no great fleets, no centuries-old technology to rely on. What they did have were scraps, rockets designed for exploration, satellites built for observation, and nuclear weapons created for deterrence. Against the Koruth, these looked like sticks and stones. But humans had always been stubborn. Where others saw junk, they saw possibility. Where others saw weakness, they saw a challenge to overcome. Engineers from every nation gathered, sharing designs once guarded as secrets. Old rivalries melted away. Russian launch systems, American space shuttles, Chinese rocket engines, Indian navigation tech, all of it was put on the same table. Humanity's toolbox was messy, but it was wide. Factories that once built cars now hammered out starship plating. Shipyards that once made cargo vessels now reworked their docks for space hulls. Even universities opened their doors, students working side by side with veterans to design systems that had never existed before. It was chaotic, unpolished, and often dangerous. But slowly, painfully, something began to take shape. The first ships were crude. They rattled when they launched. Their engines burned hotter than they should. Their controls were patched together from systems never meant to work side by side. But when the first one ignited its engines and rose into the black, the world cheered. The ship was named Resolve. It was little more than a reinforced metal shell, with engines, cannons, and a brave crew. Compared to the shining ships of the Veyron, it looked ugly, almost laughable. But it flew, and it carried the heart of Earth with it. When the Veyron delegation returned weeks later to inspect humanity's progress, they were speechless. The alien envoys expected hesitation, maybe even failure. Instead, they saw humans building ships, out of spare parts, volunteers lining up to crew them, and test flights roaring into orbit. One Veyron scientist whispered in disbelief, "You build weapons of war as though you are making toys." A human engineer laughed at that. His face was covered in grease, his hands trembling from exhaustion, but his smile was wide. "That's because we've been preparing for this all our lives. You fight wars with elegance. We fight wars with whatever we can grab and hold on to." The Veyron had no reply. But it was not only the ships. Training began on Earth and in orbit. Soldiers drilled in old bases and makeshift camps. Civilians too volunteered. Pilots, technicians, medics. They came not for glory, not for conquest, but for something far greater. To stand for someone who had no strength left. The world had seen division before. Wars had been fought over borders, religion, pride, and greed. But this time was different. This time there was no us and them. There was only humanity. Even the poorest nations contributed. Food, materials, even people. On every continent the call went out. They need us. We must be ready. And humanity answered. Still, fear was never far away. Families cried as sons and daughters left for training. Mothers whispered prayers, fathers clenched their fists. Everyone knew the truth. Once the Koruth discovered Earth, there would be no hiding. Humanity had chosen the path of war and there was no turning back. But fear did not stop them. Dr. Elias Morgan visited the first training grounds one evening. He watched young recruits practice with old rifles while engineers tested boarding, equipment nearby. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and burning fuel. It was far from the advanced academies the Veyron used to raise their warriors. And yet, to Elias, it was more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. These people were not forced into this war. They had chosen it. Every single one of them stood, there because they wanted to fight for someone else's survival. That was something no alien could truly understand yet. The first fleet was not large. Only a dozen ships stood ready, patched together with human ingenuity and stubbornness. Their armor was thin. Their weapons were crude. But when the crews gathered before launch, they stood tall. The young astronaut who had spoken humanity's first message was chosen to speak again. Standing before the fleet, her voice rang out across the base, carried by cameras to every home on Earth. "These ships are not perfect. We are not perfect. But we are enough. The galaxy has cried out and Earth has answered. We go not for conquest, but for hope. Not for glory, but for survival. And when the Koruth come, they will see something they have never faced before. They will see humanity." Cheers erupted, echoing across the hangars, the training grounds, the world itself. That night, as the first fleet lifted off into the black sky, families watched from rooftops, beaches, and city windows. Children waved, flags. Old veterans saluted. Strangers held hands. The ships may have been small and imperfect, but as their engines lit the night, they carried something greater than steel. They carried the will of an entire species. The Varen had thought Earth, too fragile, too primitive to matter. But watching those ugly ships rise, even they began to feel it. The sense that something unstoppable had been set into motion. Humanity was moving, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The day the Koruth finally came, the stars above burned red. For weeks, humanity had trained, built ships, and whispered prayers. They knew this moment would come. Every volunteer, every family who had said goodbye understood the risk. Still, no one truly believed the enemy would arrive so soon. The warning came from the Vayrine scouts. Their trembling voices crackled through human receivers. The Koruth are here. Their armada approaches. Prepare yourselves. The world fell silent. Children stopped playing. Soldiers tightened their grips on rifles. Engineers in the shipyards worked until their hands bled. The war that had seemed so far away was no longer distant. It was at their doorstep. The Koruth fleet was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Black ships like jagged blades cut across the void, their hulls pulsing with a sickly red glow. They were not graceful like the Vayrine. They were brutal, designed for destruction. Entire continents on alien worlds had already burned under their weapons. Now, those same ships turned toward Earth and its allies. Fear spread across the Varen ranks. Many whispered that it was the end. Their fleets, already broken and scattered, trembled at the sight of the enemy. For them, this battle was just another hopeless defense. But for humanity, it was different. This was their first fight, their first stand, and they would not run. The human fleet launched. Ugly, patched-together ships streaked into space, engines roaring with fire. Compared to the enemy armada, they looked pitiful, like insects rushing against giants. The Koruth laughed. Through intercepted signals, their cruel voices echoed. The primitives rise. How amusing. But the laughter did not last long. The first clash came near a shattered moon where the Koruth vanguard awaited. Their massive warships fired beams of energy that lit the void, cutting through asteroids like paper. 2 human ships were destroyed, instantly torn apart before they could even fire back. Screams filled the comms. Fear rippled through the fleet. For a moment it seemed as though the Vayrine had been right. Humanity had no chance. Then came the resolve. The first human ship ever, built for war, charged forward, engines burning white-hot. Its captain ignored orders to retreat. Instead, he shouted into the comms for all to hear. "Follow us. If we're going to die, we'll die fighting." The resolve plunged straight into the fire, dodging blasts with reckless maneuvers no Varen pilot would ever attempt. Its weapons, crude but powerful, unleashed a storm of missiles and nuclear warheads. The explosion rocked the void. A Koruth destroyer, larger and older than anything humanity had ever faced, was torn in half. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The primitives had just killed a predator. The battle turned savage. Human ships fought with madness in their blood. Where the Varen sought careful formations, humans broke lines, split apart, and attacked from every angle. They rammed when their weapons failed. They fought even as their hulls cracked. One ship, its engines dead, drifted toward an enemy cruiser. Instead of surrendering, its crew overloaded the reactor. The ship became a fireball, taking the enemy with it. Another squadron, out of missiles, launched boarding parties across the void. Marines in patched suits cut into alien metal with plasma. Torches, storming hallways with rifles and blades. The Koruth had expected machines to fight them, not humans with fire in their eyes. Every loss only made Earth's fighters more furious. Every ship destroyed became a rallying cry for the rest. The Vayrine could hardly believe what they were witnessing. These humans, who had only just stepped into the stars, fought with a savagery the galaxy had long forgotten. Still, the cost was terrible. Dozens of human ships were destroyed. Thousands of lives were lost in the void. Families back on Earth wept as names scrolled across screens. But amid the grief, pride burned brighter. For every human who fell, 10 more stepped forward to take their place. The Koruth expected fear. They expected surrender. Instead, They found defiance. By the end of the battle, the field was littered with wreckage, human, Veyran, and Koruth alike. But for the first time in centuries, the enemy retreated. The Koruth ships pulled back, their commanders shaken by what they had seen. They had faced countless civilizations before. Civilizations with power, with fleets, with technology, far beyond Earth, and yet, none of them had fought like this. None of them had fought with the sheer madness of humans. When the battle ended, Earth's fleet returned home, scarred, but unbroken. Crowds gathered in every city, tears streaming as they watched the surviving ships descend. They cheered not just for victory, but for the proof that humanity could stand against the darkness. On the other side of the War Council, the Veyran stared at humans with new eyes. What they had once dismissed as fragile, reckless primitives, they now saw as something far more dangerous, not because of their weapons, not because of their ships, but because of their spirit. The galaxy whispered a truth that spread from star to star. The humans do not fight to survive. They fight to win. And the Koruth, for the first time in their endless conquest, began to fear. The first victory against the Koruth had been costly. Humanity had lost ships, crews, and families mourned across the world. But the retreat of the HFY enemy gave the galaxy something it had not felt in centuries: hope. The Veyran could hardly believe it. They had fought the Koruth for generations, losing world after world, retreating deeper into despair. Yet this young, fragile species had stood in the fire and forced the predators to bleed. But the war was far from over. Scouts soon reported that the Koruth were not finished. A massive fleet was gathering near a cluster of dying suns, larger than anything seen before. Its flagship, a black fortress the size of a continent, was leading the charge. If it broke through, the galaxy would fall. And so the humans prepared. Again, among the fleet was Captain Mira Solon, commander of the Endeavor. She was not the strongest, not the most famous, but she was steady. Her crew trusted her, for she carried something rare into battle: calm. Mira had been a soldier long before humanity stepped into the stars. She had seen war on Earth, seen men and women fall for causes that seemed hopeless. And yet, every time, she had kept going. Her quiet strength carried others when they could not stand. Now, as she stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the enemy armada approach, she felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. The battle began with fire. The Koruth stormed forward, their beams tearing through Veyran defenses. Entire formations broke apart under the onslaught. Panic filled the comms, but the humans charged again. Their ships, small and fragile, darted like knives between giants. They fired missiles, rammed enemy hulls, and boarded cruisers in desperate raids. The Veyran, inspired, began to fight harder. For the first time, their formations held. They looked to the humans not with doubt, but with awe. And yet, the tide still turned against them. The Koruth flagship advanced, its weapons cutting through fleets like paper. No matter how many ships the humans sacrificed, no matter how many missiles struck, it did not fall. Its shields held, its guns thundered. If it reached the Veyran homeworlds, all would be lost. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Mira watched the flagship tear through her allies. She could hear the despair in their voices, could see the hopelessness rising again. Her ship was burning. Half her crew was gone. Engines sputtered, weapons nearly dry. And yet, she knew what had to be done. She stood tall, her voice steady as she gave her final order: plot a course for the flagship. Her officers froze. Captain, if we ram them, we'll be destroyed. Mira nodded slowly. Yes, but if we don't, everyone will be destroyed. The galaxy doesn't need us to survive, it needs us to win. The Endeavor turned, its broken engines roaring one last time. Across the comms, her voice rang out to every ship in the fleet, human and Veyran alike. This is Captain Mira Solon of the Endeavor. We will not retreat. We will not surrender. Tell them Earth stands. Her words spread like fire through the ranks. Soldiers clenched their fists. Pilots grit their teeth. Civilians watching from across the galaxy felt their hearts shake. Earth was not running. Humanity was not breaking. They were charging. The Koruth flagship turned its guns toward the lone human ship. It fired. Beams tore across the Endeavor's hull, splitting it open. Fires raged inside. Still, the ship pushed forward. Closer, closer. Alarms screamed. The bridge shook. Crew members clung to their stations. Mira stood tall at the center, calm as ever, her hands steady on the console. And then, with one final breath, she gave her last command. Detonate the core. The explosion lit the void like a new sun. The Endeavor's reactor went critical, releasing a firestorm so bright it blinded sensors. The shockwave tore through the Koruth flagship, ripping its shields apart, breaking its spine in two. When the light faded, the Black Fortress was gone. The Koruth fleet, once unstoppable, staggered in disbelief. Silence spread across the battlefield, and the humans roared. The Vayreen too began to shout in their strange melodic voices. Across every comm, every channel, one truth echoed: the humans had destroyed the unbreakable. The tide of war shifted that day. The Koruth retreated, shaken for the first time in their endless conquest. But the price was heavy. The Endeavor was gone. Captain Mira Solon and her crew had given everything. Back on Earth, her name became a legend. Across the Vayreen worlds, songs were sung in her honor. Even among species who had once doubted humanity, there was now respect. For centuries, the galaxy had forgotten what sacrifice truly meant. They had forgotten what it looked like to fight not for survival but for others. Humanity reminded them. And though Mira was gone, her last words lived on, carved into the hearts of every soldier, every citizen, every world that still stood free. Tell them Earth stands. The battlefield drifted in silence after the explosion of the Endeavor. Fragments of the Koruth flagship floated like broken bones in the endless dark. The galaxy had believed that fortress to be eternal, unbreakable, yet it was gone, reduced to nothing by the sacrifice of one human ship. Every species watching, from the farthest outposts to the oldest homeworlds, felt the same shiver. Humanity had done what no empire, no alliance, no ancient power could achieve. They had proved the predators could bleed. The Koruth fleet staggered. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they hesitated. Ships turned, formations broke, and their thunderous advance became a disordered retreat. The Vayreen saw it. The other races saw it. And the humans, though battered and bleeding, did not stop. They chased. Every missile, every beam, every rammed hull carried the weight of Mira Solon's last words. Tell them Earth stands. The Koruth fell back from system after system. The predators that had once crushed resistance with ease were now running from a species barely a century into space travel. The galaxy's great enemy, for the first time in living memory, was afraid. In the weeks that followed, the war front shifted. Freed worlds lit their skies with fire and celebration. On planets where despair had been carved deep into the hearts of their people, new banners rose, not just of their own kind, but of a united front. And everywhere, at the center of those banners, was the mark of Earth. The humans became more than soldiers. They became a symbol. The Vayreen, once broken, rallied with them. Other minor species who had hidden in the shadows now stepped forward. The galaxy had been waiting, not for strength, not for weapons, but for someone to believe again. And belief was the gift humanity gave. But even as victories came, humanity did not celebrate. On Earth, the skies were filled with morning lights for the lost. Families whispered names into the night, names of sons and daughters who had never returned. The Endeavor became a legend, but also a wound. For every victory there was a price, and the humans paid it willingly, because they understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Freedom was never free. Months later, the war reached its final act. The remaining Koruth fleets gathered at the edge of the galactic rim where stars burned dim and space itself seemed heavy. Their last fortress loomed, vast and cruel, a citadel carved into the husk of a dead world. The combined armada of every free species in the galaxy prepared for the final strike. At its heart stood the human fleet, scarred but unbroken. Admirals argued, strategists debated, but in the end all turned to the humans. The Vereen High Council said it plainly. You began this fight, you gave us courage. The fate of the galaxy rests in your hands. And the humans accepted. Not with pride, not with arrogance, but with quiet determination. The final battle was not swift. It raged for days. The Koruth fought with the fury of beasts cornered. Their ships poured fire like endless storms, their claws tearing at every formation. Worlds shook as weapons cracked the crust of planets and boiled oceans dry. Yet the United Armada did not falter, and at its heart, the humans once again led the charge. The end came when the human dreadnought Resolve pierced through the last of the Koruth lines. Its captain, Admiral Keon Hart, carried Mira Solin's words like a prayer. His ship rammed through defenses, opening a path for the fleet to strike the Citadel's core. The combined fire of dozens of species thundered into the heart of the fortress. And when the explosion came, it was brighter than 1,000 suns. The Koruth Empire burned, their fleets shattered. Their last fortress crumbled into dust. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy was free. When the survivors returned, they were not the same. The galaxy had been reshaped. For ages, the older species had called humans weak, fragile, reckless. Now they called them something else, the protectors of the stars. The fate of the galaxy was no longer in the hands of ancient empires or forgotten dynasties. It was in the hands of those who had come last, the children of Earth, who had walked into fire and emerged carrying hope. On Earth, monuments rose for the fallen. The names of Mira Solin, of the Endeavor's crew, of every soldier who had stood in the dark, were carved in stone and steel so no one would forget. And among the Varen, songs were sung in human words, clumsy and broken, but full of meaning. Among smaller species, children were taught the story of Earth's stand before they learned their own histories. It was no longer just a human victory. It was the galaxy's victory. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. They never meant for humans to hear that signal. Yet humanity heard it. And because they answered, because they fought when no one else would, the galaxy still lived. As the stars turned silently above, one phrase carried across every world, in every language, forever remembered.